Excellencies, dear colleagues, good afternoon to who is in person at the International Environment House, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to who is with us on WebEx or is now watching the video of the event. The Geneva Environment Network joins today the permanent mission of Kenya and the permanent mission of Portugal to the United Nations in Geneva, and warmly welcoming you for this hybrid event, launching the Geneva Blue Talks in the run-up to the UN Ocean Conference convening in Lisbon in a few weeks. Let's watch the teaser of the conference.
Lisboa recebe o encontro decisivo para salvar o oceano, proteger o futuro. A Conferência dos Oceanos das Nações Unidas, organizada por Portugal e Quênia, decorre de 27 de junho a 1 de julho. Governantes e parceiros sociais debatem ações para implementar o Objetivo de Desenvolvimento Sustentável 14, que visa proteger a vida marinha. Em 2022, o futuro do oceano decide-se em Lisboa.
The video was in Portuguese, but with English subtitles. I hope you could read them. In the run-up to this major conference, Blue Talks are taking place around the world to discuss the core issues that will be addressed at the conference, as you will hear from the permanent representatives of Portugal and Kenya in their opening remarks. In this context, Blue Talks are also convened in Geneva to address issues that are both at the heart of International Geneva and of the UN Ocean Conference. Geneva is indeed a major hub for global environmental governance, where questions regarding the sustainability of our ocean are addressed in various processes and negotiations, thus contributing to help implementing measures to achieve SDGs 14. We have with us today science and data experts from various institutions that will address knowledge gaps, available science, and the need to increase scientific knowledge to fit the decision-making process. Before we proceed with the opening remarks of this event, and I hand over to the moderator of today's journey, a quick comment on the pandemic. Almost all the remaining measures have been lifted at the United Nations Secretariat in Geneva, and our premises return to normal occupancy. We have been doing efforts in making our events hybrid and hope to inverse the current trend, which is having 10% of the attendees in the room and 90% online. So the future is definitively hybrid. Coming back to this event, a quick reminder for those who are online with us, you can raise your questions by using the Q&A box, which we will address in the Q&A session of this event. To launch and welcome you to the first session of the Geneva Blue Talks, it is my pleasure to give the floor first to His Excellency, because priority to those who are in the room, and sorry for that, for His Excellency Mr. Mailou. So we will first give the floor to His Excellency Ambassador Rui Macieira, the permanent representative to the United Nations Office and other international organizations in Geneva. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. My warmest welcome to the participants of the first Geneva Blue Talk, and in particular to my co-convener and colleague, His Excellency Ambassador Cleopa Mailou. Portugal's relationship with the ocean is a long one. For many centuries, vessels and techniques from Northern Europe and from the Mediterranean met in Portugal. By putting together these elements and improving on them, we started a process that contributed to bringing people and cultures together, globalize trade, and further develop science and knowledge. With about 2,500 kilometers of coastline, Portugal is home to a great variety of ecosystems and resources, and to 48% of all marine waters of the European Union. Counting in the exclusive economic zone and the extension of its continental shelf, Portugal is 43 times more ocean than land. Dear participants, the ocean is essential even for countries without a coastline for its vital role in climate regulation in the whole world. In fact, the ocean is our primary carbon and heat sink, absorbing more than 90% of excess heat from climate change. We now know that warming waters can alter the currents and the lives of tens of millions of people, and that the ocean's biodiversity, 80% of all life on Earth, is being harmed by acidification. Promoting ocean sustainable management is a strategic priority for Portugal. We are therefore honored to co-host with Kenya the 2022 UN Ocean Conference taking place in Lisbon from June the 27th to July 1st. Its theme is scaling up the ocean action based on science and innovation for the implementation of Goal 14, stock-taking, partnerships, and solutions. The conference will include 8 interactive dialogues to tackle a wide range of issues, such as marine pollution, sustainable fisheries, science and marine technology transfer, sustainable ocean-based economies. The triple nexus ocean, climate, biodiversity will be at the heart of the discussions, supporting ambitious actions to minimize and mitigate the adverse effects of climate change. Several special events are planned. First, the high-level symposium on water to explore interlinkages between fresh and salt water, promoting an integrated vision of the water cycle and discussing the link between SDGs 14 and 6. Second, the Sustainable Blue Economy Investment Forum to discuss how the financial sector can more effectively and consistently support the development of a sustainable blue economy. Third, and United Nations Conference Youth and Innovation Forum to mobilize youth participation in the implementation of the FCG 14, promote innovation, and facilitate the sharing of knowledge amid the new generations. The conference aims to achieve tangible results, involve the private sector, mobilize youth, and coordinate the work between the various international initiatives in the area of the sea, following up on the first edition of the conference in 2017. Our expectation is the adoption by consensus of a concise political declaration, action-oriented, focused on solutions, based on science and innovation to support the implementation of SDG 14. This declaration is under negotiation in New York. In addition to the political declaration, the submission of voluntary commitments towards the implementation of SDG 14 is also encouraged. So, the second UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon will launch the pillars of an ambitious global agenda for the ocean. The conference is a call to action. With the deadline set by the Agenda 2030 fast approaching, countries need to redouble efforts, seek joint areas of action, and make ocean management policies more efficient. These policies need to be based on partnerships and concrete ideas and involve all stakeholders. So Blue Talks like these are happening around the world to generate debate and interest in ocean issues to mobilize the public and private sectors. Given that Geneva is a major hub for global environmental governance, with the sustainability of the ocean addressed in many processes and negotiations, the Geneva Environment Network is collaborating with Kenya and Portugal in the organization of 3 Blue Talks. This first one on global ocean and coastal observation from science to decision making. The second on new disciplines on fisheries subsidies to achieve SDG 14 and improve ocean governance, which will take place on the 24th of May. And finally, the high-level briefing on the 2022 UN Ocean Conference on the 31st of May. Today, we will hear about science and its irreplaceable role in supporting decision-making towards ocean sustainability. There is a strong need for partnerships between the private sector, the scientific community, and governmental organizations at national, regional, and international levels to gather and analyze big data regarding oceanographic processes. Additional work is needed to address knowledge gaps and find technological solutions for data collection and management. These gaps are often linked to lack of training, infrastructures, and resources to conduct work at sea, scarcity of information, lack of standard data, and lack of multidisciplinary studies and approaches connecting different fields of knowledge. Integrated management policies need to rely on the best available science. The best practices and recommendations identified over these 3 Blue Talks will feed into these discussions in Lisbon. So I look forward to hearing the recommendations of our excellent panelists. Let me conclude with the inspiring words of Secretary General António Guterres. We ask all delegations to bring a plan, not a speech. Portugal very much looks forward to welcoming you in Lisbon from June the 24th to July 1st. Finally, let me thank the Geneva Environmental Network and all our panelists for contributing to our common goal, promoting the Blue Global Agenda and implementation of SDG 14. I wish us all a very fruitful event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency. It is now a pleasure to turn to His Excellency Cleopa Mailu, the permanent representative of Kenya to the United Nations Office and other international organizations in Geneva, to complete the opening remarks. His Excellency is joining us online. Excellency, over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity. My colleague, Ambassador Masiera, permanent representative of Portugal, distinguished co-organizers of the Geneva Blue Talks, participants, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to profoundly commend the Geneva Environment Network and the United Nations Program for agreeing to collaborate with Portugal and Kenya as the co-hosts of the 2022 United Nations Ocean Conference in organizing the Geneva Blue Talks in the run-up to the Oceans Conference in Lisbon in June 2022. These talks are very timely and will not only create awareness about the conference, but also present an opportunity to engage stakeholders in the process by focusing on key issues related to SDG 14 that are of priority to both the International Geneva and the upcoming conference. Kenya is also pleased to join Portugal in supporting these talks, and we look forward to working with all of you, not only towards successful outcomes of these talks, but also those of the second UN conference to be held in Lisbon from 27th June to 1st July 2022. I have a strong conviction that the outcomes of these discussions will immensely contribute to the outcomes of the Lisbon conference, as well as those of future deliberations on the Blue Economy agenda. This first session is about global ocean coastal observation, from science to decision making, which resonates well with the theme of the 2022 Oceans Conference of scaling up the ocean action based on science and innovation for the implementation of Goal 14, stock taking, partnerships and solutions, and more specifically with the sub-theme 6 of the increasing scientific knowledge, developing research capacity and transfer of marine technology. The deliberations in this session will therefore go a long way in supporting the implementation of SDG 14, specifically SDG 14.8, which targets to increase scientific knowledge, research, and technology for ocean health. We should all be cognizant of the fact that human activities are having widespread negative impacts on the ocean, such as overfishing, biodiversity loss, and ocean acidification. This state of the ocean cannot be left unattended, and therefore the international community needs to find appropriate ways of managing our relationship with the ocean and the coastal seas more effectively, so that future generations can benefit from it more than we even do. To this end, we need to be more continuously alert of how and why the ocean is changing in order to better predict the impacts of the ocean on people and or people on the ocean. It is therefore vital that we ensure continuous ocean measurements through scientific research, data, and monitoring for informed policy and decision-making processes towards a healthy and productive ocean. This will help us manage a safer and more sustainable relationship between people and the ocean. Kenya has made substantial progress towards ensuring informed decision-making in the management of the ocean and coastal areas through scientific research, monitoring, and harnessing of data. The Kenya National Oceanographic Data Center under the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute has been central in achieving this through a number of projects that include management of the tide gauge data, oceanographic data exchange with international data centers under the International Oceanographic Data and Information Exchange Network, adoption of oceanographic data management tools, and creation of a national marine and coastal bibliographic databases, among others. In conclusion, the ocean is vast and interconnected, and its impact, if not well managed, is huge and affects all of us, and therefore there is need for global concerted effort in building a truly global ocean measurement system needed to understand and monitor the ocean for the benefit of all. I believe we shall have fruitful discussions today and look forward to seeing you in Lisbon. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Now it is our pleasure to leave you in the hands of Daniel McGuinness, who is an associate professor at the Forel Institute at the University of Geneva, who will be our moderator today. He will guide you throughout this event. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for
Be
the
here and have
opportunity.
these interesting discussions. So I think we'll start off with the speakers. Our first speaker today is Lars Peter Røisgaard. He's a Deputy Director of the Infrastructure Department and Director of Earth System Branch for the WMO. So Lars Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And I thought I'd kick this off by saying a few words about ocean-related activities in WMO and why we are here. Let's see if the clicker actually is working. So there's a long history between what WMO does, which is weather and climate, and marine interest, obviously. Historically, the maritime interest of the European powers was an immense driver of the development of meteorology. And as the realization spread that meteorology really is a global game, of course, eventually we needed observations from the whole planet in order to tackle this. And the ocean became and still is a major headache for us. It is a major data gap, as I'll show you in the next slide or so. I have two examples that I want to use to illustrate how closely this is linked to WMO's activities. And finally, in more recent time, we have come to increasingly realize the necessity to see the Earth as an integrated system. We don't just talk about the atmosphere or the ocean or the land surface or the biosphere. The whole thing actually needs to play together in order for us to come to grips with, as His Excellency Ambassador Maciera said, the nexus between ocean and biodiversity and climate. You cannot tackle this separately. It is really one overall system. The reason why WMO exists is in the headline of this slide here. Weather and climate know no boundaries. You cannot tackle this locally. It does not matter where you sit on the globe or if you are only interested in climate and weather in your particular parking lot size spot. You need observations and modeling for the entire globe, not because we WMO say so, but because that is how the atmosphere and the mathematics of the equations that we use to predict it have decided. So this is illustrated here. You need observations from the opposite side of the planet in order to predict the weather where you are. I don't want to belabor this, but keep this in mind that this is a global game. We coordinate the international exchange of observations to make that happen. And you can see in this slide how well we're doing. We generate a slide like this every 6 hours. So we can see the health of the international exchange of observations. We want this to be green. If it's not green, we could do better. If it is black, we don't hear from these stations at all. If it's red, we hear from them sporadically. So this is not good. And you can see, obviously, the ocean is blue here. There are relatively few stations. So that's one of the problems that we're struggling with. Why is that? I don't know if you can see the map, but this provides a bit of an explanation. On the left is an abstraction of the map that I showed you previously. Red is bad, blue is good. Red is a very low density of observations, blue is a high density. On the right, you can see why. This is a resource map, GDP per surface area. Why do we choose that metric? It is because if you have a very large surface area, including the water, as His Excellency Ambassador Maciera said, the water needs to be observed as well. If you have a lot of water, as the sets of the Pacific SIDS in particular have, and a low GDP, then that burden becomes unaffordable. So what does WMO do to remedy this situation? We do two things. The WMO members agreed last fall to regulate this for the first time in the history of the organization, to establish formal regulations for how many observations do we need to take, how often, and we need to exchange them on a mandatory basis. So this is fixing the map with the stroke of a pen. Of course, that doesn't really work because there are some countries that cannot pay for this, as the previous map shows. And to that end, we have established, together with UNEP and UNDP, something that is called the Systematic Observations Financing Facility. that is a new financial mechanism specifically to support that implementation. It is supported by a number of donor countries, wealthy countries, who have realized for the first time that they actually have both a moral obligation and a self-interest to pay for observations far away from their own national territory. So this is really somewhat revolutionary. The legal agreement has been signed, the initial funding has secured, and this will be up and running per the 1st of July. It includes the EEZs of the small island developing states. So there's a very strong ocean component to this. This is our first way to, our first attempt to secure financing for observations in the marine area. It doesn't extend into the high seas yet, but the fact that we can pay for ocean observations nonetheless marks a breakthrough in the thinking of the wealthy countries. So we think this is a very significant development. The second example that I want to share with you is about strengthening the scientific basis for mitigation under the Paris Agreement. So WMO is considering to propose the establishment of a global, objective, scientifically based operational approach to greenhouse gas monitoring, involving the atmosphere, which is what matters for climate. What matters for climate is how much CO2 and methane hangs around in the atmosphere. But you cannot just monitor what humans are pumping into the atmosphere. You need to account for how much disappears into the ocean, for how long, how much comes from the land surface, how much goes back to the land surface. So we believe that we need to take an operational approach to this the same way that we do for weather and climate. Many of the requirements elements already exist. Greenhouse gas monitoring is a very complex landscape with a number of stakeholders, but an integrated, internationally coordinated approach to modeling and assimilation and the use of all space-based and surface-based observations does not exist yet. We are modeling that on the infrastructure that we have had running for weather prediction and climate monitoring for several decades. We will have atmospheric observations, we will have ocean observations, and we will have models of the different components and coupling with both the ocean and land biosphere model and permafrost to account accurately for how much carbon is in each of these domains and what are the exchanges between them. The take-home message is here. Our activities spanned weather, climate, and anything that is related to it. But the steady growth in demand for data products and the expectations of better and better quality has led us to realize that we need to tackle this as an integrated system. We have a breakthrough in terms of how we observe the marine areas and the less developed countries. The high seas are not there yet, but the conversation is starting. We have a new global greenhouse gas monitoring activity that has a very strong ocean involvement because of the links to not just the climate, but to ocean acidification and to a number of other things that span across the domains. It will require an integrated approach, and we are engaging very heavily with the ocean community to make that happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lars Peter, for those very insightful and educative content of your presentation. I'm sure we'll come back to some of these issues in the discussion portion. So next up, I would like to introduce Dorina Saitaj. Dorina is the program officer at IUCN's ocean team working on ocean climate biodiversity nexus. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm waiting for the slides to show up. Yes. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So I will give you a very brief overview of how the IUCN's ocean team is really bringing the data and the knowledge to the different levels of decision making. IUCN is a very large organization, and we bring together governments, civil society, NGOs, and indigenous people. And we also are a science-based organization. We have our own commissions, which are listed here at the bottom of the slide, and we work with scientific communities throughout our initiatives. And within the marine team, really we strive to bring that connection from knowledge to decision making, and we achieve our impact by implementing solutions on the ground. Our goal is to conserve and protect marine species, as well as restore and maintain marine ecosystems, and also ensure that their use is sustainable and equitable. So how do we do this? I will bring really some very brief examples. One way is, for example, by publishing a document, and this can be a very large and very detailed document, as we did for the ocean deoxygenation one, which was launched at the COP in Madrid. And these gathered knowledge from a very large group of scientists. And then we also publish other type of documents, a little bit more accessible, like, for example, issues briefs. But then the work doesn't stop there, so we continue by engaging with stakeholders coming from different sectors. It can be, for example, small fisheries, resources managers, marine protected areas managers. And this is what we did in this case. We had consultation processes, and we looked at ways of implementing some of the solutions to tackle this issue. And one thing that came up during these consultations was that actually the oxygenation, so the lack of oxygen, which already has a huge impact on marine life, does not occur alone. Very, very often in a lot of areas in the ocean, it occurs together with ocean acidification and also with temperature-driven issues, for example, ocean warming and marine heat waves. So, and these issues altogether have a cumulative impact on marine ecosystems. So then this seems like a very complicated and very difficult issue to solve. So we work together again with other stakeholders looking for a way to tackle this issue. And one of the angles was to work with marine protected areas, because marine protected areas are already structures, and some of them are performing monitoring. So one idea was to expand the monitoring that is already being done and implement some responses, some response plans, and also connect really the fisheries with the MPA managers. So this sounds like a very good idea, and it is something to keep in mind when we talk about data and 30 by 30. But what we realized, and we spoke to practitioners coming from the Western Indian Ocean and also from the Mediterranean, is that the capacity on the ground is very limited. So it is challenging for practitioners to use the data or even to generate new data due to lack of funding or to simply lack of equipment and lack of trained personnel. So we spoke about biogeochemical data, physical data, but another aspect is biological data. So we are doing relatively well in terms of physical data. This is less true for biological data. We have very large areas in the ocean where we don't have a good baseline. And this is important because we cannot track progress if we don't know the current state. We cannot track how the changes are happening in the ocean if we don't know what's in there now. So we do need to make that connection. And one way is, for example, by bringing together a large number of organizations and of stakeholders. And one example is Marine Life 2030. This is a program from the UN Decade of Ocean Science, and the goal is really to create these linkages. Then, very briefly, another way is by creating very simple tool and accessible tools that policymakers can use, as we did in this case for plankton. And we worked with the Geneva Science Policy Interface and the ETH Zurich, and they have built this tool where decision makers, where policymakers can go in and visualize the changes in plankton communities linked to different emission scenarios. And so this is an example of linking science with policy, but also linking observations with modeling. So as we saw, modeling in a lot of cases, it is necessary. It is the only way. So then very briefly, I don't have time to go in detail. We have done a lot of work on mangroves, and mangroves are examples of ecosystems which really impact the human societies which live around them. So they are not only natural carbon stocks, but they also provide other services like coastal protection, fisheries habitat, etc. So we have a very large and long-standing project on connecting all these actors together. And one of the outputs is this this global mangrove watch. It shows the surface of mangroves over time in real time. So then, for example, marine protected areas practitioners can just go online and see what it is happening and how it is evolving over time. And then the high seas was mentioned several times, and if there is an area of the ocean where we lack data, this is it. And it is at the same time an area of the ocean where we need to have collaborations and partnerships with different type of stakeholders, not only governments, but also industry, which is already there and thinking about deep sea mining and other activities. So IUCN has been involved for a very long time in the negotiations which aim to regulate the activities in the areas beyond national jurisdiction. And one of the components that is currently being discussed and is being negotiated does concern data. And there are a lot of discussions about who is going to collect the data, who is going to own it, how it is going to be distributed. So yeah, this is a very brief snapshot. And before, just to leave you with this, so we do need a very solid baseline for biological and physical data so that then we can understand changes. We need to address gaps, but we really need to think about what is happening on the ground at a very small scale and to build capacity so that data can actually be used and be useful. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorina, for the very nice overview. Next up, we have Pierre Lacroix. Pierre is the head of the Spatially Explicit Environmental Modeling Unit at UNEP in Grid Geneva, where he's also a senior scientist. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm going to present you the World Environment Situation Room contribution to the ocean, seas, and coasts monitoring. So the World Environment Situation Room, let's call it WEATHER, is a UNEP data information and knowledge platform. Dozens of partners from the public and private sectors are involved in its implementation. The goal of WEATHER is to produce assessments like emission gap reports, the GEO, Global Environmental Outlook, publish foresight briefs on emerging environmental issues, conduct monitoring, for example, the GEMS water, Global Environmental Monitoring System, on air also, and newly on ocean and coasts. Aims also to communicate through a dynamic visualization and communication products based on data. For example, we use a lot MapX for the geospatial aspects. And also WEATHER supports UN country teams to perform their CCA, Common Country Analysis, and their reporting to MEAs, multilateral environmental agreements. So I'm going to present you 5 examples of projects where WEATHER is supporting the sustainable, we hope, management of oceans, seas, and coasts. The first one, at the global scale, is the development of a dedicated workspace managed by one of the partners, Grid Arendal, who is responsible for the content, and where they have published 50 layers of data, geospatial, related to pollution, climate, and marine biodiversity. The organization of those data sets follows the Drivers Pressure States Impact Response, the Deep Sea Framework. The data are publicly available, and on demand, we can activate web services and download for interoperability with other systems. The second example that I want to showcase today is a collaboration that WEATHER, through my bureau, Grid Geneva, has with Plan Bleu since 1 year and a half. Plan Bleu is a UNEP Mediterranean Action Plan RAC, Regional Activity Center. And the collaboration aims to enable the access to a series of geospatial data sets that are relevant for monitoring the Mediterranean Strategy for Sustainable Development through a sustainability dashboard composed of 28 indicators on it's a regional level of integration, completed by thematic planches that show specific relations between human activity pressures and the state of the environment. 21 countries are concerned, the ones who have an access to the Mediterranean Sea. And in fact, we offer a knowledge management product or products that are accessible from a unique entry point in weather. But it's important to note that the data providers keep the ownership of the data. So through interoperability, we centralize this data in a visualization tool. Finally, this is also a decision support tool for the contracting parties of the Barcelona Convention. The third example is the co-design of the new UNEP Global Environmental Monitoring System for the ocean and coasts, GEMS Ocean. Possibly, we're going to work at all geographical scales with a focus on global data sets. The GEMS Ocean introduced itself as a global environmental monitoring system that provides open and easily accessible ocean and coastal data, analysis and information, guiding actions to protect and sustainably use marine and coastal resources. So the contribution of weather will be to display data and analytics. For example, we've identified a lot of data sets already. Some of them have been mentioned already, essential ocean variables and others under SDG 14. And also to offer a decision support tool for experts that are involved in the thematic of monitoring ocean and coasts. The fourth project collaboration is between Weather, again through Grid Geneva, my bureau, at the regional scale, and the Cartagena Convention Secretariat, which is operating in the Caribbean Sea and wider region. So we are going to develop an online open source regional environmental platform to support reporting on marine pollution, marine biodiversity, to support monitoring of the implementation of regional strategies on marine pollution and marine biodiversity by the Secretariat. So we're going to connect Weather and MAPEX, the geospatial application, with many data repository portals, with the UNEP document repository and others. And we are developing a knowledge management product, geospatial statistical time series, dashboards, and so on. And also, importantly, we are providing capacity building to local partners because we want them to take ownership of the platform technically, to be able to use the platform autonomously later. The last project showcased here is a proof of concept to detect aquaculture structures using artificial intelligence. So we've analyzed two types of sites: inland, in the Gulf of Guayaquil, Ecuador, with rectangular structures, and in water in Greece with circular structure that were more difficult to detect due to visibility issues in water. We've used the Descartes Lab platform, it's a weather partner, using a combination of Sentinel-2 and SPOT images. It's called the transfer learning method, this combination, because they don't have the same temporal and spatial resolution. And for the artificial intelligence algorithm and machine learning, we used the TensorFlow platform and UNet models for fast and precise image segmentation. So to conclude and to leave you with key messages, we deal with many environmental data issues and challenges within weather. How do we address them or try to address them? We transform raw data into knowledge management products, into information and knowledge. We automate data workflows as far as possible to keep the information up to date because the environmental issues, them, are evolving with time. We develop application programming interfaces to improve the interoperability between the different systems. Interoperability is a key word here. We comply with international standards for geospatial data, for example, OGC, Open Geospatial Consortium, and for metadata, ISO, in order to avoid duplicating repositories. We adopt an open source model on these projects. We use, and many data providers do the same than us. We optimize tools in terms of data transfer. For example, the application, cartographic application is less than 2 megabytes in order to be used in countries with low internet connection. And finally, we build capacity of users. I've already mentioned this. And we designate thematic experts that will be in charge of validating, selecting the data and the content into weather. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pierre, for those interesting initiatives that you have going on there. Our next presenter is Sarah Venturini. She's climate coordinator at the Group of Environmental Observations, leading the organization's engagement policy related to the implementation of the Paris Agreement. So Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel, and good day, everyone. So I would like to take this opportunity to present a few insights on the work of GEO, which stands for the Group on Earth Observations, not to be confused with the other GEO mentioned by Pierre earlier. It's a popular name, I guess. GEO is an intergovernmental partnership created in 2005 to support the coordination and openness of Earth observation to enable better decision-making and shaping more effective global policies. We are a very small secretariat in Geneva, but we have a big community. We connect 120 national governments, international agencies like the ones present in this room, academia and research organizations, data providers, businesses and financial institutions, and local communities. And we want to create innovative solutions based on science, really, which is a priority to tackle multiple challenges at the same time, especially for this big challenge that the ocean represents, as His Excellencies Ambassadors Maceira and Mailu have recalled earlier. So GEO members and partners lead over 60 joint activities that are across multiple sectors and areas, and these together cover 7,000 data providers and 4 million Earth observation data that are free and accessible for all. And when we talk about Earth observation, we mean data and information collected about the atmosphere, the ocean, and land, which includes both environmental but also socioeconomic and cultural variables. And this can take the form of satellite imagery, remote sensing, as well as ground-based or in situ data. Okay, satellites are particularly helpful for real-time decisions and disaster risk reduction because of their accuracy and timeliness, and they can reach areas that are scarcely covered by ground or sea infrastructure, but they work even better when they are combined with other data and information that are generated by other Earth observation sources like in situ data collected on the ground or on the sea, and modeling, as well as artificial intelligence, machine learning technologies, and so on. And then this data can be optimized and turned into services for target users. With regard to the oceans, Earth observation can really support the preparation for marine spatial planning and integrated coastal zone management by countries with environmental, social, and cultural assessment and scenario building, but also Earth observation can help monitor later phases like the implementation and the achievement of agreed objectives because of the various components that Earth observation can cover. And these are some examples of the generic applications for the ocean and coastal areas that can be developed. In the GEO work program, as I said, we have a number of activities, and many of them are generating specific products that are recognized as a contribution to the ocean, the Decade of Ocean Science and the Marine Life program. And I'm giving you some examples here. Digital Earth Africa Coastlines tool, for instance, maps the location of the coastline at the mean sea level for each year, and then uses these annual shorelines to calculate and visualize the rates of coastal erosion or coastal accretion. And this is set up to be an effective management tool for Western African countries and coastline, and it's already being used by coastal managers and local authorities in Senegal and other countries in the region. And training local stakeholders is a big component of this program, which is important to ensure sustainability in the long run. Then we have GeoMarine Biodiversity Observation Network that produces global coastline explorer tool, which essentially allows to zoom in to any stretch of coastline in the planet and learn about its ecological attributes. I think this may be of interest of Dorina. GeoBlue Planet has developed WaveForce to address increasing flooding due to big waves that come even during a sunny day to hit especially small island states. This WaveForce tool essentially provides forecasting 1 week ahead of the flood event at 3-hour intervals. And it is very important because this forecasting tool may be used to support early warning systems, particularly for reef-line coasts in developing countries, but also long-term planning of coastal infrastructure and investments. And finally, CEOS Coast is a coastal coordination program by the Committee of Earth Observation Satellites, which is essentially the consortium of all space agencies in the world. Essentially, they are tackling high impact problems in high impact areas through co-development with regional stakeholders to develop a series of tools, including habitat mapping, coastal eutrophication, shoreline mapping, etc. And there are some pilot areas. So I just want to emphasize by giving you these few examples that all data and products are open and free, so that pilot products can be then scaled up to become global products. Capacity development is an embedded element, and new applications are being developed to support climate action, for instance, including mapping of blue carbon for nationally determined contribution or supporting national adaptation plans. And yes, that's it. I just want to leave you my contacts for future interaction if you want to be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So I believe our next speaker is online. Is that right? So our next speaker is Amir Siraj. He's a Chief Operations Officer at the Atlantic International Research Center. Hello, I can see you there.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can see them.
Yes, perfect. So, good afternoon e boa tarde, Embaixador Rui Macieira. Good afternoon, Ambassador Cleopa Milo, and our great appreciation on behalf of the Air Center for the invitation by UNEP to these Blue Talks. We're going to be speaking also the Air Center at the Blue Talks that is going to happen also in Washington, D.C. this week, and our CEO will be there. So I'll give an overview, very brief, and I think it was mentioned that we are in a global game, and you're going to see in my presentation that I think we're very well aligned, and I think we need to even collaborate even further. The Air Center is a recent international organization distributed around the Atlantic. We aim to promote job creation, knowledge-based around Atlantic regions, of course, promoting scientific excellence, aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and trying to integrate the areas of space, climate, earth, ocean, energy, and data sciences. So I think this is something that we talked around the previous presentations about integration, and I'm going to give you a flavor of what we are doing. We are promoting South-North, North-South cooperation, and we have defined for the Air Center thematic missions that I'll present further. We are already a big network around the Atlantic. Of course, the ocean is just one, but we are focused in the Atlantic Ocean. These are the list of countries that we are working with different geometries or institutions or at government level. We have a General Assembly at the Air Center that has many of the countries that you see here working together around the challenge of the Atlantic. This is just a map. If you can see, we have different models of membership, partnerships, on also regional agreements. And I'll not go here through the details, but we are working with several organizations like the MBON, Geo mentioned, I think you know this very well, the Marine Biodiversity Observation Network, but also the European Space Agency, and other organizations focused in the challenges that we have in the ocean. These are our 5 thematic missions on bays and estuaries, resilient coast natural hazards, sustainable food production, and improve management of marine and coastal resources, and also improve environmental and maritime monitoring. This is what we agreed with our network to be our main areas of work, and we identified several user needs that also were mentioned during the previous presentations that are really affecting many of the Atlantic countries that are in our network. And we need here, of course, the data and the instruments that can support in mitigating and solving these needs. At the Air Center, we are prioritizing on data, certainly, to support impacting activities and decision-making towards sustainable ocean. And we have 3, let's say, verticals: flagship initiatives, key projects, capacitation, and networking. On flagship, and I think I'll not go through this model, but the vision is really an integration of a system of systems where we can have the space component with satellites that were mentioned, the atmospheric component with sensors, high altitude platforms or UAVs, and also the sea surface component and underwater that really need to connect together, and the data they collect to be in a fusion way together working, then to be processed in different levels of data, and then this data to be then transformed in information or knowledge information to the end user. We on the space component, we have a very important flagship project that we call Atlantic Constellation, where we know that today there are several satellites like Copernicus that are working, but they are not sufficient to fill the gap to many users on resolution, latency, and revisit time. So we are working this with our network to fill this gap with a constellation of 16 satellites. Portugal and Spain are very committed to this project. And also we today have developed with the European Space Agency a NASA lab in the Azores, where is the headquarters of the Air Center, where we have a direct receiving station already operational and collecting data from 6 satellites, from NASA, NOAA, like Terra, Aqua, and others, so that we can already work on applications from extreme weather alerts and disaster monitoring. So this is something that we are in an operational phase and implementation. Regarding this is just for you to have a location. So we are more or less in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the Atlantic, in Terceira Island, one of the 9 islands of the Azores. Certainly Ambassador Rui Macieira knows. And we also are developing a data center that will process around 219 gigabytes of data per day from this antenna only. And we are developing a system to give this data to our users within the Air Center network and of course, with other partners in a data lake model and through APIs for the different needs of the different users. Just coming to the Atlantic Constellation, as I mentioned, these are many of the needs from the science in terms of measurements. I will not go through here the details, but temperature, chlorophyll, vessel monitor. There are a lot of measurements needed, currents and so on, and you need instruments for that. And this constellation, and we've been working with many of the partners in the Air Center. We did a user requirements workshop that joined around more than 300 users around the Atlantic. And these were the instruments that are somehow at a certain priority: AIS, multispectral and hyperspectral cameras, and also GNSS, our sensor for sea level rise, and all the measurements that were mentioned before. So this is just an example how the data here is key, and what is one of the initiatives we are currently developing. On key projects, we are also, and aligned with our missions, working in Earth observation for the area of fisheries in aquaculture to develop a service that could promote sustainable fisheries in aquaculture. LabPlage is regarding the monitoring and mapping of plastics in the ocean, because this is, as you know, a huge problem. Ports 21 regarding ports, as you know, the tourism activity is very active in certain locations, and certainly now without the COVID, this will continue to increase, and we need to evaluate and deploy actions to more environmental, let's say, ports that today certainly this is an issue. Also, we are in a very interesting project recently that we are mapping the marine biodiversity current state of affairs. It's an European project, really to understand what is happening at European level regarding the systems that are being developed, and we are doing this with several partners. Interesting year in Azores, we are working on what we call a free technological zone, really to test solutions that can be scaled to other regions of the Atlantic. And in the Azores, this is a kind of test lab where we can join ocean and space technologies working together for specific problems in a more free area to test technology. I will not go through, but we have several projects also in development focused in aquaculture, also in marine, in microplastics detection, as mentioned. Also, and lastly, capacitation and networking. We have a PhD program where we want to train the leaders of the future regarding many of the challenges that we have around the Atlantic. And these are some of the areas in data science, health, marine robotics, marine litter, numerical modeling, biodiversity, ocean accounting, and Earth observation. And we will have 60 scholarships that we have to provide. These are international scholarships until 2023. So this is an ongoing program that we have. And I'm almost finishing. We are, and the colleague presented about the services of the UNEP grid. We joined recently and we want to contribute to the activities of the UNEP grid and the World Environment Situation Room, as it was presented. And we already have a meeting that we're going to participate in 1st of June, and we will certainly use our infrastructure to contribute to the UNEP grid. Then we also are hosting the MBON Secretariat in the Azores, that is part of the GEO MBON. And we are a member of the UN COPUS, and also recently joined the Scientific and National Committee in Oceanic Research, the SCORE, again, to mobilize the community that is here in Portugal working on ocean science. And lastly, we and I think here this is an important point, we need to collaborate even more. Of course, when we talk about using data has several levels, from raw to, of course, processed. And we have been developing this discussion, Networking Fridays. These are some statistics where this has been one of the issues discussed. Also, we can harmonize data for specific areas and purposes of scientific research. So, and I stop here, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amir, for joining us from Portugal. So we're pretty good on time. So in the next about 20 minutes, we'll open the floor to questions and discussion. So those in the audience, if they have questions, please send them via text, or people in the live audience here are free to ask questions. But I want to thank all the presenters. It was a really well-balanced presentation of both the limitations, what's missing, what's available, and how that's being applied into real decision-making and perhaps policy-making. So maybe me being an oceanographer, maybe I can just start it off with a question I think covers everybody here. So I say who wants to answer. So I think you've shown a lot, and Lars Peter, you showed really well the importance of integrating the oceans and the terrain and everything in the Earth climate models and how important this is. But at the same time, I've also heard it said that we know less about our oceans than we do about the solar system. So one of the points brought up by several speakers is the importance of collecting additional data, because we have to understand the heat budgets of the ocean if we're going to be able to model the climate correctly. So I wanted to ask openly what they think of this issue, and how could we address this in a way that moves forward in an efficient and useful manner. Go first.
You called me up, so I'll go first. Yeah. So there are a number of different ways that you can do this. It's a fact that historically and actually currently most ocean observations are research funded. And I've heard it said often that you know less about the deep ocean than you know about Mars. So it's sort of, it shows a couple of different things, I think. I think we're strengthening this as our curiosity level expands. And I can see it very clearly in my limited area of weather and climate. We used to care about the sea surface. Now we care about the ocean deeper and deeper as we get better and better at it, and as the coupling between the atmosphere and the ocean becomes more and more important. There is a fragility to the research funding of observations that we are trying to tackle in WMO. So I tried to show you how this is used for day-to-day decision making on weather prediction, but also as a key policy instrument under the auspices of the Paris Agreement. And the case that we're trying to make is that it is not right that the Paris Agreement implementation and monitoring hinges on something where a PI needs to go and beg his funding agency on a year-to-year basis. Could you please give me another year of this? So I think we need to have a conversation about the research that needs to happen, and there is a bunch of research that needs to happen, but there are observations that need to be taken on a 20, 30, 40-year time frame that sort of needs to be decoupled from that, and I think that is a conversation that we are happy to engage in. It is just our particular angle to your question. There are many other facets to it, but I think it's an important one.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think the problem always, the deeper you go, the costs exponentially increase. So it's definitely not a linear process. So thank you very much for that. Do we have any questions from the audience? Did you want to follow up? No. Okay. Maybe that's one thing I can bring up as well, is the recent inclusion of the methane finally in the IPCC report, because we know methane is about 85 times stronger than CO2 on a 80 or 20-year time scale. And we've just seen the latest measurements showing that it's that the alarm bells are going off, and that's certainly one of the issues that we missed. So we can maybe discuss this in context of also where these data need to be measured, and obviously the ocean is key, but maybe regional, how this can be accomplished and how these data can be efficiently implemented into decision making and policy regarding the greenhouse gases. Who wants to tackle it?
I don't want to hijack.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mentioned this integrated greenhouse gas monitoring activity that we have. Carbon tracking and carbon monitoring is a very interesting area, because there are so many. I mean, we've seen a lot of slides here with acronym soup, but I think this afternoon, I mean, this environmental monitoring in general is characterized by many initiatives, many stakeholders, and also many coordination activities. And part of the reason for that is the fact that it is research funded. So there is a certain fragility to it. What we're trying to do with this integrated greenhouse gas monitoring initiative is to set up a framework where we can have a structured conversation about what are the observational needs from surface from space for the different domains and for the different disciplines, because otherwise it can become a shouting match where somebody says, yeah, we really need to measure this variable in the mangrove areas, and somebody else say, no, it's all about methane, or it's all about carbon in the permafrost area, or something third. So I think an integrated framework where you can analyze requirements based on modelings that, as Dorina was also mentioning, is really the backbone of how observations are used for many different things. We know how to do this in the weather world. We have we are running models every day, many times a day, and we let the results of that set the requirements. If you do that in an integrated sense, I think you can come to grips with what are your observational needs, and then you can have a funding decision. I'm not going to comment on methane in particular. I know a bit about methane on land, not so much about where you need to measure it in the ocean. But I think it's a great question, and I think we need a structured way to answer it rather than having different interests sort of shouting across the room to each other.
Can anybody comment? Is there any model-derived aspect in this decisions? No. So I don't monopolize it too much. We have a question from the audience. Read it for you. We have seen many platforms and initiatives that help measure ocean data, produce scientific knowledge, and also policy recommendations. Can the Oceans Conference provide an opportunity to bring all of these platforms together so that the scientific data and information could be available for academia and policymaking? What would be needed for this from the international organization's perspective as well as the academia?
I can try. I can try with the international agency's perspective, and then maybe leave academia to our friend. It's a great suggestion, and of course we can only agree about the fact that we need to integrate all these platforms and work together, and how this can be endorsed during the Lisbon conference. Well, I think a practical suggestion would be to focus on national action. We need to strengthen action by countries that includes the need to invest in ocean science and monitoring for multiple challenges at the same time. So developing or strengthening integrated national policies, to me, is the answer, like marine spatial planning, integrated coastal zone management, and climate action policies, like targets for mitigation, greenhouse gas emission reduction in nationally determined contributions, and adaptation targets in national adaptation plans to increase the resilience of coastal zones are they need to be grounded on science, but at the same time they're all working towards the same objective. So these policies need to be tackled together. I'm not suggesting there should be a single policy document that sort of covers all of this, but they really need to be integrated, and that could be the starting point, so that all these platforms could also work together to develop the necessary science and solutions that respond to the challenges.
Yeah, maybe from the international organization, UNEP side, and the academic side, through University of Geneva, I can complete the answer. There is a question of reliability of the data, because through all these platforms, you will encounter many data in different formats, coming from different sources, collected differently. The methodology of collection will not be the same if it's in situ or if it comes from Earth observation. And I think it's important that the data is reliable in order not to be contested by the different stakeholders. And then that's joins the points that I mentioned during my presentation. It's important to have thematic experts that will be in charge of not collecting, but validating, identifying the right data, and selecting the data that have to be published and that have to be disseminated for the scientists, for the academia, and other stakeholders.
Thank you very much, Sarah and Pierre. Maybe a little bit following that line, how can we build capacity on the ground for the data use and informed decision-making in local management and marine ecosystems and resources? And a little bit more broadly on that, how are we sure that there's interaction between these, that they know these resources exist and how to efficiently utilize them? Yeah.
Well, I must start with saying that it's very challenging, and this is something that we noticed that, and related to what was just said, that there is already a lot of very good information, but it is not easy to use it on the ground. And so, as Sarah already mentioned, this needs to be done at a national level, so governments can work, but also at a regional level. For example, the Nairobi Convention has done excellent work, for example, on ocean acidification. So bringing really countries together and having a common program, common goals, common targets, and teaming up in terms of effort, because it is a lot of effort on the ground. And in the Mediterranean, there are also a lot of initiatives, but a little bit more sparse, and there is a disparity between the northern and the southern and eastern part of the Mediterranean. But it is really by teaming up and having a centralized way as well of displaying the data, and then going down towards the more end users, so to say, being then a very small aquaculture area or just small fisheries, and then or a small bay which is being managed at the regional level. And there you really need to bring the funding, and it needs to come from the governments or from the marine protected areas. And when we look at marine protected areas, what it is easier to do is to have networks of marine protected areas. It is very challenging to do it if it's a small one. And it is better to have networks of MPAs and to have larger ones so that then they can fill the funding in that way. It requires a lot of training. It requires a lot of resources. Yeah.
If I may complete, I think there are other challenges here. The first challenge is the price of the data. In order to be exploitable and usable, the data need to be public. So that's a big issue now. We need to involve the private sector and encourage them to provide data that are free of charge. The second, maybe other challenge that I see is the fact that the data need to be comprehensive to be used. So according to what I mentioned in my presentation, we are facing a proliferation of data at the moment. Our colleague from Azores said he's processing 290 gigabytes per day, but many institutions are doing this. So we need to transform this data, to aggregate it at certain levels of usability, so to provide actionable information and knowledge, and also to document the data, because the data need to be discoverable, searchable, standardized, and easy to understand. And I know that documenting the data is something that is complex, tedious. People don't want to do it because it's not the most sexy part of the job, but it has to be made easier, and that's us, developers of platforms and scientists that need to develop user-friendly tools for documenting the data. And finally, I would say that another challenge is to understand the end user needs. Maybe this can be done at national level in order to build capacity and to develop tools that are easy to use for them and that will not stay white elephants never used.
I just wanted to complement what has been said on mobilizing resources. I think and we have had experienced here the Air Center at regional level in the Azores region and also at national level. I think mobilizing ideas or developing ideas for projects in the ocean, as I mentioned a few, and develop these ideas to a prototype stage. This is easy to find the funding, is easy to find the partners. But then, as I presented, we are an Atlantic network. But if you want to scale prototypes in a more, let's say, international perspective, that then becomes hard. It's quite challenging to find the right funding instruments and how you really scale solutions that really are, they have interest to be implemented in other geographies that have the same problems. I think this is something that is that the funding mechanisms, they don't match the different geographies. And I think this is a gap or a challenge that we should think about. On another perspective, and I think we mentioned lightly on industry, it's not easy in certain of the projects we have been involved, the Air Center, then to bring industry on board. When you talk about the ocean, we talk about a huge investment to be made, so usually. And there is always the question, how is the sustainable business model for a specific activity? I think this is also an issue, because we're talking about solving the ocean challenges, but then if you want to build a sustainable ocean economy, how we do that? So I think this is also a gap, a challenge that we need to consider.
And then adding to what Pierre mentioned, so yes, tools are excellent and it's very important to have user-friendly tools. Something to keep in mind is to perhaps involve stakeholders at an early stage before developing the tools, because we sitting here in Geneva might come up with very good ideas, but then it might not be the first thing that it is necessary on the ground. So that would be in engaging with stakeholders at an early stage. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the very interesting discussion and comments. We have a little bit of time remaining and I don't want to miss this part, so we'll do a little lightning round here of the panel. So what I would like is for each speaker to give, let's say, a short 30 seconds or so sort of take-home message of what the audience can bring back home in preparation for the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon next month. And maybe let's start in order of our presenters. So,
thank you very much. I think I want to build on what Pierre just said. Make the data available. It's good to make observations. It's good to analyze the requirement, try to meet the requirement, and try to solidify the funding. But make sure that the data are available. An observation that sits with whoever took it or remains at the site where it was made really doesn't help the global game here. So I think that is an important message to bring to the table, perhaps especially for research-funded observations.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you very much. Darina?
Yes, and once the data is available, we really need to build very strong partnerships among different stakeholders so that then the information can be shared and can be used. And especially we need to build capacity at all levels so that then this data can be translated in action and in solutions. Yeah. This is my take.
Thanks. Next, Pierre.
Yes, I totally agree with what you just said, because my takeaway message was about collaboration between the various stakeholders involved in the ocean, coast, and the sea monitoring. So we collaborate first with the public sector, with MEAs, international organizations, the academic community, but also with the private sector. I insist on this. This will be probably an important aspect of the question later, and we have to encourage them to make the data first and maybe the tools publicly available in order to participate, to contribute to the global effort.
Thank you. Yes, Sarah,
Yes.
please.
Sure. My take-home message really is about coherence. It is important to strengthen action across the wider UN system and the UNFCCC to address the multiple challenges that the ocean is facing with consistent policies. Under the UNFCCC, I think the ocean should be included as an inherent part of all work streams, including as an important aspect of the Paris Agreement global stocktake, so that scientists and experts can help policymakers understand if progress has been made through Earth observations, for instance. And it is critical to align global finance to support ocean and climate action at the same time. And under the wider UN, I think there is an opportunity to build better frameworks to coordinate our collective efforts and pool our scientific resources and initiatives to maximize our chances to protect the ocean. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Amir?
I think, yes, not to repeat what has been said, I think one important point is to agree on common challenges. And I think the takeaway is really to try to, prioritize on common challenges towards the ocean. And this agreement on common challenges should be done by the oceanographer, by the marine biologist, by the space scientist, by the data scientists. They have to agree on these common challenges to work together towards the common goal. I think this is important. And lastly, I think we didn't spoke about this, but we have a strong youth that is more aware about the environmental challenges. And I think the training at secondary and level and also at the university level should be even more focused on the ocean, but integrated with other disciplines. So this would be the takeaway. Thank you.
Thank you. I completely agree with that on the education, well, all the points actually. So I think at this point, Diana?
Maybe His Excellency wants to add something, and then we can turn to.
No, well, thank you very much. I think we got a first very good input for Lisbon. I very much look forward to the next two Blue Talks, Geneva-based. And as my colleague from Kenya said, we very much look forward to seeing you in Lisbon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency. I think we have come to the close of this session. We would like to invite you to join the next Geneva Blue Talk, which is taking place next week. So first, of course, to thank you all, the panelists who are here with us, but also the people who have joined us online or on the social networks, and people who have joined us in person at the International Environment House. We would like to bring to attention the next session of these Geneva Blue Talks, which is going to be next week, and we are going to discuss fisheries subsidies, with certainly some outcomes of the Fish Week happening these days at the World Trade Organizations. Many of the people involved there will be on the panel next week. And then we will close these Geneva Blue Talks with a high-level briefing, which is taking place the following Tuesday. But of course, discussions on the ocean continue in Geneva, in all the institutions that were present on the panel today, and the others that will join us in the next talks, but also in many others that we didn't this time associate to these talks. And for those who are also, another topic that we are often discussing in Geneva is plastics. We are building a new agreement to end plastic pollution. And we have, there's another co-opening working group meeting at the end of this month in Dakar. And we are organizing this week on Thursday, a briefing on what will be discussed in Dakar and preparations for Dakar. So you are all welcome to join us either online or in person here at the International Environment House. And next week, also an interesting topic where we are discussing another type of data is an event on the climate tipping points. It's a proposition that Switzerland wants to make at the IPCC to have a report looking at the climate tipping points and the impacts it will have on our planet. And with that, I think we can close the audience. And once more, thank you, Daniel, also for the moderation of the panel and everybody that was involved in the preparation of this event. Thank you all.